Lost and injured deep in an unforgiving forest, millionaire life hangs by a thread. Just when all hope seems lost, two black teenage brothers from a struggling family find him and risk everything to save him. But what begins as an act of kindness sparks a chain of events that will transform not only millionaire life but an entire community. The forest was alive with its own language, leaves whispering in the wind, branches creaking as they swayed, and birds singing high above in the canopy. The sunlight barely pierced through the dense foliage, leaving the ground below dappled with patches of golden light. It was beautiful, serene, but also intimidating. This was nature in its rawest form, untouched and indifferent to the presence of humans. Lucas Carter adjusted the straps of his high-tech backpack and sighed deeply, his breath visible in the crisp morning air. At 60, Lucas was no stranger to the wilderness. Despite being a millionaire with the means to live a life of absolute comfort, he found solace in escaping the noise of the modern world. Nature, he often told himself, was the one place where a man could truly think. Dressed in expensive yet functional hiking gear, boots designed for uneven terrain, moisture-wicking clothes, and a durable weatherproof jacket, Lucas felt prepared for anything the forest might throw at him. Or so he thought. The trip had started like many others. Lucas parked his luxury SUV near a remote trailhead, far from any town or city. He had planned for 3 days of exploration, carefully mapping out the paths he intended to take. His backpack was stocked with premium energy bars, purified water, a first aid kit, and a GPS device that could function even in areas with no cell signal. The morning was invigorating. Birds darted between the trees and squirrels scurried along the forest floor. Lucas walked with purpose, his boots crunching on the soft bed of pine needles. He paused occasionally to admire the scenery, snapping photos of rare plants and vibrant fungi with his professional-grade camera. "Perfect," he muttered, capturing a particularly striking shot of sunlight filtering through the trees. Around midday, Lucas stopped by a stream to refill his water bottle, using a portable filtration system. The cool water tasted pure, refreshing him for the journey ahead. He glanced at his watch. Plenty of time before I need to set up camp, he thought, standing and stretching. But the forest, as beautiful as it was, held its dangers. By mid-afternoon, Lucas veered off the marked trail, enticed by the sight of a vibrant bird with iridescent blue feathers. He followed its path through the trees, snapping pictures as it flitted from branch to branch. Each step took him deeper into the woods, farther from the safety of his planned route. "Just one more shot," he murmured, adjusting his camera's focus. The bird perched momentarily on a low branch, then took off again, leading him toward a steep incline. Without warning, the ground beneath Lucas's feet gave way. The soft, rain-soaked soil crumbled, and he tumbled down the slope. Rocks and roots scraped against his arms and legs as he fell, his camera slipping from his grasp. He landed with a thud at the bottom, the breath knocked out of him. For several moments, Lucas lay still, dazed and disoriented. Pain flared in his right leg, and when he sat up, he saw a long, shallow gash running from his knee to his shin. Blood seeped through the fabric of his hiking pants, staining the khaki a deep crimson. He tried to stand but winced as a sharp pain shot up his leg. "Great," he muttered, gritting his teeth. "Just great." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Lucas realized the gravity of his situation. His GPS device had been damaged in the fall, its screen cracked and unresponsive. His phone, tucked safely in his backpack, displayed a disheartening no-signal message. He was alone, injured, and far off the planned trail. That night, Lucas set up a makeshift camp at the base of the slope. Using the remaining strength in his arms, he gathered dry branches and managed to start a small fire with the lighter from his pack. The warmth of the flames was a small comfort, but it did little to ease his growing anxiety. As darkness enveloped the forest, the sounds around him changed. The cheerful chirping of birds was replaced by the eerie calls of nocturnal creatures. Twigs snapped in the distance, and the occasional rustle of leaves hinted at unseen animals moving through the underbrush. Lucas stared into the fire, his face illuminated by its flickering glow. His mind raced with worry. Would anyone find him? How long could he survive out here? His rations were limited, and his injured leg made traveling nearly impossible. The millionaire, who had once felt invincible in his curated life of comfort, now felt small and vulnerable. By the second day, Lucas had managed to crawl back up the slope but found himself even more disoriented. The dense forest seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction, and no matter how far he walked, he couldn't find his way back to the trailhead. His water supply dwindled, and he began rationing his food. Every step was a struggle, his injured leg throbbing with each movement. The once pristine forest now felt like an endless maze, its towering trees and dense foliage offering no clues about where he was. Lucas shouted for help periodically, his voice hoarse and desperate. "Hello? Is anyone out there?" The only response was the indifferent echo of his own voice. By the third night, exhaustion and hunger had taken their toll. Lucas leaned against a tree, his body trembling from fatigue. His once pristine hiking clothes were now tattered and stained with dirt and blood. He hadn't seen another human soul in days, and the isolation weighed heavily on him. As the fourth day dawned, Lucas felt his resolve begin to crumble. He stumbled forward, his steps uneven, his vision blurry. He had nearly accepted defeat when he heard a faint sound cutting through the stillness of the forest. Voices. Lucas's heart leaped. He stopped in his tracks, straining to listen. "Over there." A young voice called out, filled with urgency. "I heard something." A moment later, two figures emerged from the trees. They were teenagers, dark-skinned, their simple clothes slightly worn but sturdy. The older one, about 17, carried an axe over his shoulder, while the younger, perhaps 14, held a bundle of traps in his hands. Lucas stared at them, his breath catching in his throat. He tried to speak but could only manage a weak help. The older boy, Elijah, approached cautiously, his sharp eyes scanning Lucas from head to toe. "Mister, are you okay?" he asked, his voice steady but concerned. Caleb, the younger boy, rushed forward, dropping his traps. "Elijah, he looks hurt bad," he said, his voice rising with alarm. He turned to Lucas, his expression softening. "Don't worry, sir. We'll help you." For the first time in days, Lucas felt a flicker of hope. These boys were his lifeline in a forest that had seemed intent on swallowing him whole. And so began their journey, one of trust, resilience, and the quiet kindness of strangers. Elijah's sharp eyes darted between Lucas's pale face and the makeshift bandage on his leg. The older boy's instincts kicked in as he assessed the situation. "He's not going to make it out of here on his own," Elijah muttered, half to himself. "We have to do something," Caleb said urgently, his younger face tight with worry. He bent down next to Lucas, who was slumped against a tree, his breaths coming in shallow gasps. Caleb placed a tentative hand on Lucas's arm. "Sir, can you stand?" Lucas tried to speak, but his voice cracked, barely audible. I'll try," he managed, the effort making his head swim. He braced himself against the tree trunk, trembling as he attempted to push up with his uninjured leg. The pain shot up his shin like a lightning bolt, and he collapsed back down with a grunt of frustration. Caleb looked at Elijah, panic creeping into his voice. "Elijah, we can't just leave him here." Elijah nodded, his expression hardening with resolve. "We won't. We'll help him." He turned to Lucas, his voice calm and steady. "Sir, we're going to get you out of here. It's not far to our place, but you'll have to lean on us." Lucas glanced between the two boys, his weary eyes filled with gratitude and disbelief. These kids, barely old enough to be on their own, were stepping in to help a man they'd never met. "Thank you," he rasped, his throat dry and parched. Elijah stepped beside Lucas, looping the man's arm over his shoulder, careful to avoid the injured leg. Caleb positioned himself on the other side, offering support for Lucas's other arm. The boys exchanged a quick look, their unspoken coordination clear. "Lean on us, sir," Caleb said. "We'll take it slow." Lucas nodded, his head feeling heavy. Each step was agony, the injured leg dragging uselessly as the boys bore the brunt of his weight. They moved slowly, carefully navigating the uneven terrain of the forest floor. Twigs snapped beneath their feet, and the distant call of a bird echoed in the thick canopy above. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours as they trudged forward. Lucas's body ached with exhaustion, but the boy's steady presence kept him moving. Caleb, despite his smaller frame, chatted softly, his voice a constant reassurance. "What's your name, sir?" Caleb asked after a while, glancing up at Lucas. "Lucas," he replied weakly. "Lucas Carter." Well, Mr. Carter, we're almost out of the thickest part of the forest, Caleb said, his tone as bright as he could muster. Just a bit further, okay? Lucas gave a faint nod, his lips twitching into something resembling a smile. You can call me Lucas, he murmured. As they walked, Lucas couldn't help but notice the quiet efficiency with which the brothers moved. Elijah led with calm confidence, his gaze constantly scanning their surroundings for potential hazards. Caleb, though younger, had an infectious energy that seemed to make the task at hand feel less daunting. You boys live out here? Lucas asked between labored breaths, his curiosity cutting through his exhaustion. Elijah answered without looking back. We live with our grandma. She raised us after our mom passed. It's just the three of us now. Caleb chimed in, his voice softer now. We come out here a lot to chop wood, set traps, and sometimes just to explore. It's how we help Grandma keep things running. Lucas frowned, his heart tightening at the thought of these two boys bearing so much responsibility at such a young age. That's a lot for you to take on. Elijah glanced at him briefly, his expression unreadable. We do what we have to. After what felt like an eternity, the dense forest began to thin, and a small clearing came into view. In the middle of it stood a modest wooden cabin, its weathered exterior blending seamlessly with the surrounding trees. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, and the faint smell of something savory wafted through the crisp evening air. We're here, Elijah said, his voice laced with relief. Come on, let's get you inside. Caleb dashed ahead to open the door, calling out as he did. Grandma, we found someone in the woods. He's hurt. The door creaked open, revealing a woman in her 70s with a shawl draped over her thin shoulders. Her face, lined with age and wisdom, lit up with concern as she stepped outside. What happened? She asked, her voice warm but firm. He fell and got hurt, Elijah explained as he helped Lucas toward the cabin. He's been out there for days. The woman's eyes softened as she took in Lucas's disheveled appearance. Oh, you poor man, she said, stepping aside to let them inside. Come in, come in. Let's get you warm and taken care of. The cabin was small but cozy. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting flickering shadows across the walls. The furniture was simple, well-worn chairs, a sturdy table, and a faded rug that added a touch of warmth to the wooden floor. The scent of vegetable stew filled the air, and Lucas's stomach growled involuntarily. Sit him down here, the woman instructed, gesturing to a chair near the fire. Elijah and Caleb carefully lowered Lucas into the seat. The warmth of the fire was immediate, seeping into his chilled bones. The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Carter, no relation, she joked with a small laugh, brought over a bowl of steaming stew. Eat this, she said gently, placing the bowl in his hands. It'll help you get your strength back. Lucas accepted the bowl with trembling hands, murmuring a quiet thank you. The first spoonful was a revelation, hot, savory, and nourishing. It was the first real food he'd had in days, and he could feel his body responding almost immediately. As he ate, Mrs. Carter knelt by his injured leg, her hands deftly unwrapping the makeshift bandage. It's not too deep, thank goodness, she said, inspecting the wound. But we'll clean it up and wrap it properly. Elijah fetched a clean cloth and a small bottle of antiseptic, handing them to his grandmother. Caleb hovered nearby, his wide eyes watching her every move. Does it hurt a lot? Caleb asked, his voice full of concern. Lucas shook his head, though the sting of the antiseptic made him wince. I'll be fine, thanks to you boys. Later that evening, as Lucas sat by the fire with his leg bandaged and his stomach full, he couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the kindness he'd been shown. These boys, who had so little themselves, had gone out of their way to help a complete stranger. You saved me, Lucas said quietly, looking at Elijah and Caleb. I don't know how to thank you. Elijah shrugged, his face calm but resolute. You don't have to thank us. You needed help, and we were there. That's all. Mrs. Carter smiled warmly from her rocking chair. That's how we've always done things around here. You help when you can, no matter who it is. Lucas nodded, his throat tight with emotion. I don't know many people who would do what you did. Caleb grinned, his youthful energy shining through. We're not like most people, Mr. Carter. For the first time in days, Lucas felt a sense of peace. This little family in the woods had reminded him of something he'd forgotten in his years of wealth and privilege. Kindness didn't have a price tag, and it often came from the most unexpected places. As the fire crackled and the forest outside settled into quiet, Lucas made a silent vow to repay their generosity in a way they would never forget. Lucas Carter woke the next morning to the sound of birds chirping outside the cabin. The soft light of dawn filtered through the simple curtains, casting warm hues across the room. For a moment he didn't know where he was. The bed, though modest, was far more comfortable than the forest floor he had spent nights on. Then the memories of the past few days came flooding back: the fall, the desperation, and the two boys who had saved his life. He sat up slowly, his muscles stiff but no longer throbbing with pain. His injured leg was wrapped securely in fresh bandages, and his body felt stronger, thanks to the food and care he had received. The smell of something cooking wafted through the air, drawing Lucas toward the small kitchen area. Mrs. Carter stood at the stove, her movements slow but practiced as she stirred a pot of what smelled like porridge. Caleb sat at the table, sketching something on a scrap of paper, while Elijah leaned against the doorway, sharpening an old axe. "Good morning," Lucas said, his voice still a little rough. The family turned toward him, smiles lighting up their faces. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," Caleb said cheerfully, putting down his pencil. "How's your leg?" Lucas smiled, limping slightly as he walked to the table. "Better. Thanks to you all. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Mrs. Carter waved her hand dismissively as she ladled porridge into a bowl and placed it in front of him. "You don't owe us anything, Mr. Carter. Helping someone in need is its own reward." "Grandma says that all the time," Caleb added, grinning. "But it's true. We were just glad we found you in time." Elijah, always more reserved, gave a small nod. "You would have done the same for us." Lucas looked at the three of them, a lump forming in his throat. Their humility and kindness were humbling. He'd spent decades surrounded by people who saw the world through transactions, favors given in exchange for something. But here was a family who had nothing to spare and yet gave so freely. After breakfast, Lucas insisted on helping out, though Mrs. Carter was quick to tell him to rest. "You're still healing," she said, wagging a finger at him. "You don't need to worry about anything." But Lucas, not one to sit idle, found small ways to pitch in. He helped Caleb stack the firewood the boys had collected, pausing occasionally to catch his breath. The physical effort felt good, grounding him after days of helplessness. As they worked, Caleb talked excitedly about life in the forest. "We set traps to catch rabbits and squirrels," he explained, pointing to a small, well-crafted snare nearby. "Elijah taught me how to make them. He's the best at it." Lucas glanced at Elijah, who was quietly inspecting the axe blade. "You two seem to work well together," Lucas said, admiration in his tone. Elijah shrugged modestly. "You have to out here. It's just the three of us." Lucas thought about the weight those words carried. For these boys, life was a series of daily challenges: gathering food, chopping wood, and caring for their grandmother. Yet they didn't seem burdened. Instead, they moved through their tasks with quiet determination, each small success a testament to their resilience. As the day wore on, Lucas began to prepare for his departure. His strength had returned enough for him to walk without too much pain, and he knew he couldn't impose on the family any longer. That evening, after another hearty meal of stew and bread, Lucas stood and faced the Carters, his heart heavy with gratitude. "I can't thank you enough for what you've done for me," he began, his voice sincere. "You saved my life, and I'll never forget it. But I want to do something for you in return." Mrs. Carter shook her head, her expression kind but firm. "Mr. Carter, we didn't help you for a reward. Seeing you safe and well is all we need." "I understand that," Lucas replied gently. "But please, let me help you. I have the means to make things a little easier for your family." Elijah folded his arms, his face thoughtful. "We don't need much, sir. We've been fine on our own." Lucas smiled, meeting Elijah's steady gaze. "I know you don't need much, but wouldn't it be nice for your grandmother to have a little less to worry about? Or for you boys to have time for things other than survival?" Elijah glanced at Mrs. Carter, who hesitated before speaking. "You've already been so kind, Mr. Carter. But what did you have in mind?" Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope filled with cash. "This is just a start," he said, holding it out to Mrs. Carter. "To cover repairs for the cabin, supplies, or anything else you need." The room fell silent. Caleb's eyes widened as he stared at the envelope, but Mrs. Carter shook her head firmly. "We can't take your money, Mr. Carter. It wouldn't feel right." Lucas stepped closer, his voice soft but insistent. "Please, think of it as an investment in your family's future. You helped me when I needed it most. Let me do the same for you." Mrs. Carter looked at her grandsons, her resolve wavering. Finally, she nodded, her eyes glistening with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered. "We'll use it wisely." The next morning, Lucas prepared to leave. Elijah and Caleb helped him pack his belongings and led him back to the edge of the forest, where his car was parked. Before climbing into his SUV, Lucas turned to the boys. "You've got something special here," he said, gesturing toward the forest and their home. "Don't ever lose that." "We won't," Caleb said confidently, grinning. Elijah extended a hand, and Lucas shook it firmly. "Take care, Mr. Carter," the older boy said, his tone serious. "And don't go wandering off trails anymore." Lucas chuckled, nodding. Lesson learned. As he drove away, Lucas glanced in the rearview mirror, watching the two boys wave until they disappeared from view. His heart was full, but his mind was already racing with plans. He had seen the strength and goodness in that family, and he knew he couldn't let their kindness go unanswered. Back in his world of wealth and influence, Lucas began making calls. He reached out to his contacts, sharing the story of the Carter family and the profound impact they had made on him. Within days, he had assembled a team to help him bring his vision to life. He wasn't just going to repay their kindness, he was going to ensure that their future, and the future of families like theirs, was brighter than they could have imagined. And with that, the next chapter of their story was set into motion. 2 weeks after Lucas Carter had driven away from the small cabin nestled at the edge of the forest, life for Elijah, Caleb, and their grandmother carried on much as it always had. The boys spent their days chopping wood, setting traps, and caring for their grandmother, while the nights were filled with the crackling warmth of the hearth and quiet conversations over simple meals. Though Lucas's envelope had provided a buffer of financial relief, the family had chosen to use it sparingly, determined not to let the gift alter their modest way of life too much. Yet, none of them could have predicted the ripple effects of their encounter with the millionaire or how quickly their lives were about to change. The day began like any other. Elijah and Caleb were in the woods, checking traps, when a faint rumble reached their ears. It wasn't the sound of animals or the wind, it was mechanical, foreign. Elijah paused, his hand tightening around the handle of his axe. "Do you hear that?" Caleb asked, squinting through the trees. Elijah nodded. "Yeah, but it doesn't sound like anything from around here. Let's head back." As the boys approached the clearing where their home stood, their jaws dropped in unison. Parked in front of the cabin was a sleek black SUV with tinted windows, and behind it, a small caravan of trucks loaded with supplies. Men and women in work boots and jeans were unloading materials: wood planks, tools, and bags of cement. Standing in the middle of it all, dressed in casual slacks and a jacket, was Lucas Carter. His sharp eyes scanned the bustling scene, a satisfied smile on his face. "Mr. Carter," Caleb called out, his voice tinged with shock and excitement. Lucas turned, his smile widening. "Elijah, Caleb, I thought you boys might be out in the woods." The brothers hurried to his side, their expressions a mix of confusion and curiosity. "What's going on?" Elijah asked, his tone cautious. Lucas clapped a hand on Elijah's shoulder. "I told you I'd repay your kindness. This," he gestured toward the trucks and workers, "is the beginning." Mrs. Carter stepped out onto the porch, her weathered face a mixture of surprise and concern. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice steady but questioning, "what is all this?" Lucas approached her, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. "Miss Carter, I've been thinking a lot about your family, about how much you've done for me and how much you've given, despite having so little. I wanted to do something meaningful in return." She folded her arms, clearly unsure how to respond. "We don't need much, Mr. Carter. You've already done more than enough." "I understand," Lucas said gently. "But please hear me out. Your family gave me more than just food and shelter. You reminded me of the value of community and kindness. I want to honor that by helping you and others in this area who might be struggling." Lucas explained his vision. He had arranged for the cabin to be repaired and expanded, ensuring it was better insulated for the harsh winters. A new water filtration system would be installed, along with solar panels to reduce their reliance on firewood. Beyond that, he intended to build a small community center nearby, a space that would offer resources and support for other families like theirs. The Carters stood in stunned silence as Lucas spoke. Caleb's face lit up with excitement, while Elijah's expression remained stoic, though his eyes betrayed a glimmer of hope. "Why would you do all this?" Elijah finally asked, his voice quiet. Lucas's gaze softened. "Because kindness like yours deserves to be paid forward, and because I believe this can be the start of something bigger for all of us." Over the next few weeks, the clearing near the Carters' cabin transformed into a hub of activity. Construction crews worked tirelessly, while Lucas oversaw the project with a hands-on approach. Elijah and Caleb quickly became involved, helping the workers wherever they could and learning new skills in the process. The community center itself was modest but functional, a sturdy building with a large common area, a small kitchen, and a few rooms for workshops and gatherings. Lucas ensured it was stocked with essentials, books, computers, and supplies for teaching basic trades and skills. Elijah, always observant, took an interest in the construction process. One of the workers, a kind man named George, showed him how to use various tools. "You've got a knack for this," George said one afternoon as Elijah expertly measured and cut a piece of wood. "You ever think about becoming a carpenter?" Elijah shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Never thought I'd have the chance." Meanwhile, Caleb found his place among the younger children who began visiting the center. His natural energy and creativity made him a favorite among them. He organized games, taught them simple crafts, and told stories about life in the forest. "Caleb's got the gift of gab," Mrs. Carter said proudly one evening as she watched him entertain a group of kids in the newly built common room. "He's always been good with people." When the center was finally completed, Lucas arranged a small celebration. Families from the surrounding area were invited, and the clearing buzzed with life as people arrived to see the new building. Lucas stood at the front of the crowd, a microphone in hand. He glanced over at the Carters, who stood near the front, Mrs. Carter with her shawl, Elijah and Caleb in their best clothes. "This community center," Lucas began, his voice steady, "isn't just a building. It's a symbol of what can happen when people come together. When kindness is given freely, without expectation, it creates ripples that can change lives." He turned toward the Carters, his gaze lingering on Elijah and Caleb. "I wouldn't be standing here today if it weren't for this family. They showed me a kindness that I'll never forget, and I hope this center can honor their generosity by helping others in the same way." The crowd erupted into applause, and Caleb beamed, nudging Elijah. "See? We're famous now." Elijah rolled his eyes but couldn't suppress a small grin. In the months that followed, the community center became a lifeline for the area. Families came to learn new skills, children found a safe place to play and learn, and Mrs. Carter became an informal advisor to many, her wisdom and warmth drawing people to her. Elijah and Caleb continued to play active roles. Elijah began apprenticing with George, learning the trade of carpentry and dreaming of one day starting his own business. Caleb, meanwhile, became the unofficial ambassador of the center, always ready with a smile and a helping hand. As for Lucas, he visited frequently, though he often stayed in the background, content to watch the Carters and their community thrive. Each visit reminded him of the lessons he had learned in that forest, that wealth was meaningless without purpose, and that true riches came from the connections we build with others. One evening, as the sun set over the forest and the community center buzzed with activity, Lucas stood with Miss Carter on the porch of their newly refurbished cabin. "You've done a lot for us, Mr. Carter," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But I hope you know that what you've built here isn't just about money. It's about heart." Lucas smiled, his gaze sweeping over the clearing. "I've learned more about heart from your family than I ever did in all my years in business." Mrs. Carter patted his arm, her expression warm. "Then you've done all right." As the sounds of laughter and conversation filled the air, Lucas felt a deep sense of peace. What had started as a desperate cry for help in the forest had become the foundation for something extraordinary, a community built on kindness, resilience, and hope. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.